Suddenly, there was an explosion deep within the forest. Out of nowhere, a long sword shot down from the sky and struck the ground. A message appeared, quest complete. Crafting skill has increased by 1 level. A new item has been successfully created. Ceremonial Dagger. The Ceremonial Dagger is an item embedded with ancient runes that trigger bursts of magic. When used in combat, it has a chance to cause an explosion within a certain range. With each strike, the chance of triggering an explosion increases. Item crafting difficulty, 3 stars, spirit level. The explosive elemental magic is inherited from the fire origin technique, storing magical energy with each use to power small blast zones. Ed Ross-Statler grasped the hilt, pulled out the sword, and said, "This is the dagger that's been with me since the very beginning. I couldn't have survived without it. I'm really lucky I engraved so many elemental runes on it. Now, it's become much stronger." Mug, standing nearby, shouted, "Congratulations, Master. You successfully embedded explosive spirit runes into that dagger. From now on, it'll be even more useful to you. This really is something to celebrate. Not everyone can master the art of rune embedding like you, Master Aid." He glanced behind him. Mug kept talking. "To celebrate my master's success, I'll sing a psalm of praise to make you happy." Hearing that, he picked it up. Mug struggled and said, "This is an ancient song about a shepherd who succeeded in raising his sheep. It's been passed down through generations. Oh dear Master Ed, if you're not happy with it, just say so. I won't do it again. I'll take this as a lesson for myself." It started crying and whimpered. "I know it was wrong of me to do that. Please forgive me and give me time to reflect on my mistakes, Master." Ed spoke up, "Hey." Mug stopped crying, yes. Ed Ross-Statler looked up at Manhwa and said, "If you have something to say, just say it." Mug began. The little spirits left the spirit world to become lower spirits who serve humans. At that time, they choose powerful sorcerers so they can learn many things from them and also be protected by them. Many different spirits were gathering around Janica. He continued, "To put it simply, it's like Janica, a high-ranking spirit mage. It's completely normal for small, powerless spirits to form contracts with someone like her. But still," Ed Ross-Statler interrupted, "I've been wondering about this. Why did you make a contract with me? Something about it doesn't feel right. I'm not exactly a spirit mage, and you haven't really learned much from me either. So, did you promise someone something?" Mug stammered. "It's because..." Ed crossed his arms against the cold and continued, "I think we need to be honest about this. We've been together for a while now. We know each other well enough." Mug stayed silent. Then suddenly he burst into tears and cried out, "Oh, Master Ed, how could I ever hide anything from you? With all my loyalty to you, everything I say comes from the bottom of my heart. I follow you out of respect, nothing more. For a small creature like me, being by your side is already the greatest honor." Mug went on, "Thanks to the contract with you, I've been able to benefit from both you and Lady Janica. The things you know about ancient magic and language have helped me a lot too." Mug happily continued, "With those 2 benefits, I'll be able to grow much faster and finally fit in with the other little spirits." Ed Ross-Statler let out a sigh and asked, "All right, do you have anything else to say?" Mug replied, "Of course, there's still a lot more, but what you did back at the academy, that's all changed now. Before, everyone disliked you, didn't they? But now, people have started to respect you. Those bad habits are gone, and because of that, I've gained a lot too." From the forest, Ed's voice echoed, "Seems like I'm starting to understand you better." As they walked, Moo kept talking. "My life, ever since I came to the spirit realm, has always been tough. The higher level spirits constantly push me around, making things miserable. But now, being with you makes me really happy. Still, I can't really blame anyone for it. That spirit hierarchy has been around forever. Everyone just wants more power, that's all. So no matter what, I just hope that one day I'll be strong enough not to be pushed around anymore." Ed Ross-Statler said, "All right, it looks like you and I are in the same boat now. We'll rely on each other and push forward together." Mug replied with excitement, "Thank you so much, Master Ed. No matter what, I'll follow your lead. I'll do my best to learn. I can't just depend on your strength anymore." Ed answered, "All right then, just do what you feel is right." Ed Ross-Statler paused to think. "The combat skills I've gained so far are still too limited." He swung down hard on the log with all of his strength. It wasn't clear how much time had passed, but behind him, only a few pieces of firewood had been split. He kept thinking still, "With all this training, my body has gotten a lot stronger. I've even built up some muscle now. The storage in the house is better stocked too. We've got meat, vegetables, and fruits, just about everything we need. The food supplies in the warehouse are full, well organized, and clean." He continued reflecting. "I guess I've managed to secure a place to live, so at least I don't have to worry about that for now. I've been studying harder too. Even though the lessons are still tough to grasp, I've learned the basics and understand much more than I used to." He sat down at the table under the dim light. He was holding a pen, writing something. "I need to make more time to study effectively. If I keep studying like this, the knowledge will stay in my mind. I won't need to rely on natural talent or an exceptional memory if I keep working hard and training like this. He wrote with full concentration, completely focused on what he was doing. Day by day, I need to keep trying. Only by doing that can I achieve better results in my studies and make sure I can survive the way I want to. As time passes, things will get better. Tomorrow will be better than yesterday. That's what I'm aiming for. Suddenly, he closed his eyes. A voice echoed in his mind, "And eat." The voice woke him up. He opened his eyes and saw Janica in front of him, looking very worried. "Wake up, are you okay, Eid?" she asked. He sat there holding the piece of paper and said, "Oh, sorry, Janica. I was just thinking about everything that happened earlier, so I got a little distracted." Janica comforted him. "It's okay. You've already done a great job. Just don't push yourself too hard. Take care of your health." Ed Rossdaler glanced off to the side. "I should probably just focus on the 3 letters I received today," he said, turning his attention to the envelopes in his hand. One was from the Academy. The second was from the Elter Trading Guild. He looked at both and figured there was nothing particularly unusual about them. It was the 3rd letter that caught his attention. As he read it, he realized things had gone far beyond what he understood. This wasn't something he could take lightly. A vivid image flashed in his mind, Janica and Lortell standing face to face in confrontation. He thought to himself, with the first 2 letters, this all seemed like a simple rivalry between 2 groups of students, each trying to get their hands on this sage-sealed grimoire. But now, this has turned into a 3-way war at the Academy. And now, the Merchant Guild and the Rossdaler family are involved too. A thick book filled with strange and unique markings came to mind. Ed Rossdaler continued thinking. Crippen Rothdaler is planning to steal the sage-sealed grimoire for his research into immortality. Of course, pulling that off wasn't going to be easy. That's why he decided to try negotiating for it instead. Crippen Rothdaler was a major antagonist, one who only shows up in the 4th chapter of the game. The Academy's image gradually turned dark. A shadowy figure appeared. He had already arrived by that point. Now his power was nearly unmatched. Who could possibly stand against him? This was the hardest problem to solve. Unless the game's storyline changed, there was almost no way to keep the sage-sealed grimoire if he decided to take it. A fake blur nearly wiped out the entire Academy. He thought to himself, of course, if he gets the sage-sealed grimoire, he'll become even stronger. He was already the final boss of Stage 4, but now it was only Stage 2. Who could possibly stop him? Ed Rossdaler was afraid, but no matter what, whether that figure got the sage-sealed grimoire or not, just his presence alone meant everything was already set in motion. The letter only gave a brief mention of Crippen Rothdaler and predicted his actions at the Academy, so there was still a lot he didn't know. He sat silently on a log, staring at the letter. Still, it included a message. He had to stay alert and follow it carefully. A voice came from the Academy. "I went to the northern forest to deliver the letter to him, just as the lady requested." Theonia, holding a teacup, spoke. "All right." She sat in a chair, teacup in hand, with a servant by her side. She continued, Claire. Claire was kneeling on the floor. Theonia thought to herself, based on what our insider reported, I've figured out that Sylvania Academy is facing serious financial trouble. The book had fallen into someone else's hands. She continued thinking, even though I can't directly support private educational institutions like Sylvania Academy, if this situation drags on, it's going to cause problems for everyone involved. What's even more concerning is that the Elter Merchant Guild might end up getting their hands on the sage-sealed grimoire. That grimoire can't just be sold off to keep patching things up. If that happens, it would be a disgrace to Sylvania Academy. That's why the headmaster came to be for help, she reflected. Still, a hint of worry crossed her mind. Even so, she glanced at Claire and said, "Something doesn't feel right. How could Crippen Rothdaler even know about this negotiation, let alone show up to join it?" Claire stood up and replied, "Seems like that kid Ed gave him a heads up. He lives at the Academy, so he probably heard the rumors. If I were a child of that family and had the chance to restore my family's honor, I wouldn't let that opportunity slip by either." Suddenly, a voice spoke up. "I don't think it's necessarily him." Lortell stepped forward and said, "I'm just a commoner. Am I allowed to sit here and talk to the princess?" Theonia looked at her with an unfriendly gaze. She clearly hadn't expected to see Lortell again. Lortell sat down across from her and continued, "I thought you hated me, Lortell?" Lortell started to reason. Why would the princess say that? Anyone can take part in trade, right? Whether you like someone or not doesn't really affect business. King Elt of the Golden Kingdom held the paper in his hand as Lortell spoke up again. Regardless of everything else, Crippen Rothdaler's involvement in the seizure of the sage-sealed grimoire might have something to do with my stepfather. Phonia was taken aback. What did she say? Lortell replied confidently. From the start, he asked my father to cover the debts the company owed him, so this might be one of the conditions my stepfather had to agree to in order to get some breathing room, like with those other debts. Of course, my stepfather has already lost his position in the association, but that just made him even more determined to get his hands on the Save Seal grimoire. If he gets it, he might be able to use it to gain some leverage with the Merchants Guild. Phonia, seeming to understand a bit more, said, I still don't really get it. The Merchant Guild only works for profit, right? So if they get the Save Seal grimoire, are they planning to sell it to the Rostaler family? Are both sides fighting over it? Is the Elk Merchant Guild trying to compete with the Rostaler family for it? Why don't they just make a deal? Lortell took a sip of tea before replying. Of course, it's because I don't want the Save Sealed grimoire to end up with the Rostaler family. Given my background and position in the Merchant Guild, I see things a little differently. Naturally, that means I have a very different view from my stepfather. You understand that, don't you, princess? Phonia looked at her and said, all right, I'm done talking about my company's internal matters. The enemy of my enemy is a friend, after all. Lortell set her teacup down and said, of course. If the princess invests in my trade guild instead of the Rostaler family, both sides benefit. We're already familiar with each other, after all. She smiled and added playfully, naturally, that would make Aid happy too. Isn't that right, princess? If there's anything you're unsure about, you can ask him directly. Phonia replied, so you're thinking of him too, huh? Lortell continued, of course. He was expelled from the academy and now lives alone in the forest. But don't hold it against him just because you think he's still connected to the Rostaler family. He was cast out from the family too. Phonia thought coldly to herself, she, a cold-blooded merchant, actually cares about someone else? I really didn't expect that. Then she turned to Lortell and said, and what if he's doing all this for his own gain? I've seen him go from person to person asking for favors. If there's a good deal to be made, there's no way he'd pass it up, would he? Phonia continued, he probably didn't tell you this, did he? At that, Lortell set her teacup down. She calmly responded, so he really didn't say anything, did he? Phonia looked at her and went on. If he didn't say a word, then I'll take that as my cue. In that case, I'll do whatever benefits me, even if it means using him for my own goals. Lortell's hand froze midair, her whole body trembling. She said, you mean you'd use him and lie to him? Is that it? Wiping away her tears, Lortell let out a bitter laugh. Do you even have the guts to do something like that? From behind, Claire shouted, how dare you speak so rudely in front of Princess Phonia? Lortell stood up and said, Princess Phonia. Phonia gave a command. Claire, that's enough. Lortell pulled her hood up and said, we're on the same side this time, aren't we? So I want to give you some honest advice. She stepped closer, glanced down, and added, don't even think about using him half-heartedly. You might end up being the one who gets used in the end. Claire couldn't hold back and raised her voice. Should we teach her a lesson for her arrogance, Princess Phonia? Phonia shouted, that's enough, Claire. Phonia lowered her gaze and began to think. It really was strange. First the mysterious Ed Rostaler, and now Crippen Rothtaler, also seemed connected to the purchase of the Save Sealed grimoire. But maybe what was even more concerning was that proud and fearless girl, someone who didn't even bow her head before a princess like Phonia herself. She watched Lortell's figure as she walked away and thought about her. Had that girl ever shown worry or concern for someone else like that before? Lortell stepped inside and suddenly exclaimed in surprise, what is this? Janica greeted her warmly with a wave. Hi, Lortell. Long time no see. How have you been? Next to her was Ed Rostaler, visibly tired, with dark circles under his eyes. Hello. At the Elter Trading Company's Sylvania branch, Lortell returned the greeting, looking a bit flustered. Sorry, I didn't know Senior Janica would be coming, so I only prepared 2 cups of Pelance and mountain rosemary tea. Would you like a cold drink instead? Outside, the sunlight was soft and gentle, shining through the glass windows. Inside, Janica said, all right then. Looks like this tea was stored by the Merchant Guild to stockpile it. But since it's meant for sale, I guess we can't really offer it to guests, huh? Lortell replied, that's right. Ed Rothtaler, picking up on the moment, said politely to Janica, I'll drink water so you can have the tea. Janica responded, okay. On the other side, Lortell overheard their conversation. Her whole body trembled. She turned her head, forced a smile, and said, all right, you should come pick up the magical tool. Ed Rothtaler replied coldly, all right. Once inside, standing before a cabinet full of valuable items, Ed Rothtaler couldn't help but look surprised. Janica quickly grabbed a glowing ore and said loudly, look at this. They're so new, there's not even a speck of dust on them. Giving away our products for free would go against everything a merchant stands for. Lortell, standing nearby, spoke in a smug tone, oh my Janica, you really can't tell the difference in product quality at all, can you? Janica, holding the item in her hand, was startled by the comment. Lortell continued, if you look closely, you'll see that these things have a lot of flaws. Janica replied in surprise, really? This one? Realizing she had been tricked, Janica's face turned red with anger. You did this on purpose. Lortell turned away, brushed off her hands, and said, yes, but the most important thing here isn't whether these products can sell. It's whether they're useful to Ed, isn't it? Hearing that, Janica looked down in embarrassment. Seeing her reaction, Lortell added, right, thanks, but it feels a bit wrong to accept these for free. Besides, I haven't even paid for the previous purchases yet. This is the 4th time already, Lortell said, hands on her hips. You just need to remember our contract. It's not like it's a huge amount of money anyway. Janica chimed in, actually, if he could just pay the full amount soon, that would end the contract with you, right? Lortell cut her off. Isn't that something between me and him to discuss? Janica suddenly remembered and said shyly, you're right. Those two really did talk about all sorts of things. He could still hear their voices echoing in his ears. At that moment, Ed Roththaler was sitting with his head down, looking like something was bothering him. It was happening again. That same familiar feeling swept through his body. Ed felt like he was falling underwater, like he was floating with no control. There were so many things he needed to take care of, yet lately, this strange feeling kept coming back. Then his mind jumped to Crippen Roththaler, the twisted man with his dark spellbook. Ed reminded himself to stay on guard around Crippen. The people involved in buying the sage-sealed grimoire wouldn't arrive for another 2 weeks, so for now, the most urgent matter was, he pictured a bed in his mind. I need to make a mattress. Maybe I can lay down some fabric and stuff it with wool or other soft materials to make it more comfortable. In his mind, Ed Roththaler laid out each task clearly, in order. The day after tomorrow, he needed to take care of the young deer he just caught. It was also time to clean the inside of his tent again. His mind went quiet. He found himself thinking about Lucy's dried meat again. Underwater, Ed Roththaler slowly opened his eyes to the sound of Lortell and Janica calling out to him. His whole body felt numb, as if he were sinking into the depths. Images of Janica and Lord appeared, their faces filled with worry as they kept calling his name, Ed Eid. Back where Lortell was, the buildings were carved with intricate detail. Phonia, holding a cup of tea in her hand, stared out the window. She thought, is it time to finally admit the way he fished so diligently at the campsite and the calm, thoughtful answers he gave while fighting Glaskin? She remembered how Taylor's body had been covered in scratches that day. That memory stayed with her. The other students said he only cared about studying, but Luke had warned her not to underestimate him. Phonia's eyes grew a little sad. She lifted the teacup to her lips, but couldn't bring herself to drink. Maybe my warning wasn't strong enough, she thought. I'll check again to be sure. She remembered the time she delivered the royal letter to Ed Roththaler. Because of that, she had ordered him to come to the royal estate. With her eyes closed, still holding a teacup in her hand, she asked, Claire, have you finalized tomorrow's schedule? When is Taylor supposed to arrive? Claire knelt on the floor and said, Princess Phonia, it seems he won't be able to come for now. Phonia asked, why not? How could he ignore a royal order? Claire hesitantly replied, Ed Roththaler has collapsed from exhaustion. Hearing this, Phonia immediately looked worried. Her face showed disbelief at Claire's words. A status report appeared detailing Ed Roththaler's health condition, including illness, fatigue, various symptoms, a high fever from overexertion, digestive issues, chronic exhaustion, dizziness, intermittent unconsciousness, difficulty breathing, impaired vision, and muscle aches and pains. His magic had also been negatively affected. He needed complete rest to recover from this abnormal condition. Ed Roththaler winced and let out a soft groan. Slowly. He opened his eyes. He felt short of breath, his whole body heavy, and his stomach burning with heat. Lucy was curled up on top of him, making it impossible for him to move. She was fast asleep on Ed Roththaler and muttered in her sleep, it's too salty, just a little bit. He gently lifted his upper body and looked at Lucy. This girl, even talking in her sleep, he said. Her body was much lighter than it looked. He remembered carrying her before. She was so small that he could lift her easily with just one hand. It even made him wonder if she was really human. He turned his thoughts inward, but I can't move at all. Lucy seems fine, so is there something wrong with my body? Too exhausted to care, he lay back down and gave up on getting up. Staring at the ceiling, he thought, I'm completely drained. Suddenly, Lucy's voice broke the silence. He looked around carefully and realized he was in his own tent. But this new blanket, it probably belonged to the Elk Trading Guild. Lucy sat up groggily, rubbing her eyes. I'm starving, she mumbled. Ed Roththaler added, is there anything you actually do besides eat and sleep? Lucy grinned. Congrats, you're finally awake. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand, and a glowing blue orb of energy formed in her palm. Without another word, she pressed it directly into Ed Roththaler's chest, letting the energy flow into him. Your magic is a complete mess, she said. You've been studying and practicing nonstop without giving your body a break. Months of that, and this is what you get. Ed looked at her and asked, you did all this while I was asleep? Lucy replied casually, it wasn't that hard, just really boring. I dozed off a few times. She seemed a little annoyed as she brought up Janica and Lortell. I think they caught me sleeping once or twice. What a hassle. But whatever, it had to be done, so they can't really complain. Just don't get sick again, okay? Hearing that, he looked at her with a sudden surprised expression. Lucy kept her head down, and she seemed to be in a bad mood. Her energy was almost radiating off her. She said, being sick is such a pain. Some people even die because of it. Ed Roththaler looked at her and thought she must be remembering her grandfather, Clocked, who had died in his hospital bed. He couldn't bring himself to meet her eyes. Lucy was sitting on top of him, and although he couldn't move, he still managed to say, thanks. I only got better because of you. Suddenly, a voice came from outside. Ed Roththaler turned to look. Oh, you're awake? Senior. Standing just outside the slightly open door was Jix from the magic department. He called out, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to use the kitchen inside, so I started a fire out here instead. Both Ed Roththaler and Lucy froze when they heard Jix. Lucy, flustered, quickly turned around and pulled a hat over her head. She escaped up to the chimney. Jix, stunned, asked, Senior, just how many girls are there? Holding a few pieces of firewood in his hands, he walked over to Ed's bed and said, well, I guess it makes sense. Strong men often have lots of women around. It's not that unusual. Is this an open-minded take on community living? Maybe my idea of it has been too narrow all along. Ed Roththaler asked, why are you here? Jix glanced at him thoughtfully, then replied, because Janica had to attend class and Lortell went back. She couldn't leave her business unattended for too long. The pot was boiling over the fire as their conversation continued. Ed Roththaler said, your hair is already autumn. Jix carefully fed him spoonfuls of porridge. The taste was so bad it made Aid gag a little. I can usually eat anything, but not this. Jix replied bluntly, what do you expect me to do? Maybe it'd go down easier if someone sweet like Elka or Clara was feeding you. He added calmly, but Lortell said no girl is allowed to feed you. Through Jix's words, Lortell came across as fierce and unyielding. Ed Roththaler stayed quiet, forced the food down, and looked at Jix. Let's just check the storyline like we always do. Wasn't there a part where you said the alchemy students secretly grew ginseng and caused a mess? Jix replied to him, oh, Alvira, the one who always causes trouble. In the end, Taylor and Clebius took care of that quickly. They also successfully handled the monster. Hearing that, he thought to himself, good, episode 2, scene 5, the Academy exploration, seems to have ended well. Jix continued, I heard a rumor that Taylor's group defeated a monster. It had slipped into the Academy's underground water system, but they managed to take it down quickly. Jix added, yeah, Taylor and I handled it, but that rumor is true. Why do you ask? He thought episode 2, scene 7, the demon in the sewers, was completed without any problems. That means the only big event left is negotiating to buy the wise master of secret scripture. After that, he turned to Jix and asked, how long have I been unconscious? Jix replied, today makes 10 days. Then Jix said, everyone's going to be shocked when they see you awake. Hearing that, he was stunned. He thought it had only been a few hours. He let out a surprised gasp. Jix continued, but today they can't be here with you. Right now, Senior Janica still has to stay at the Academy and Lortell is busy preparing for an important negotiation tomorrow, so she had to leave. Suddenly, he grabbed the bowl of porridge from Jix's hands and pulled himself together. I thought only a day or two had passed. I can't believe I've been asleep for 10 days. Jix was surprised and called out to him, Senior Aid? Ed Roththaler, sweating, said, hey, Jix. Jix replied, yes. Ed Roththaler, still in shock, said, I need to send a message to Lortell right away. There's no time to lose. One day after Ed woke up in Act 2, the scene was full of unexpected developments. Rows of beautifully designed buildings came into view. The negotiation to purchase the sage-sealed grimoire, wise master of secret scripture, had begun. Among those involved was Princess Theonia Elias Kloll. On one side, Theonia sat upright behind Claire. On the other side sat the vice president of the Elter Trade Association, a smug look on his face. And if everything went according to the original script, the sound of someone's footsteps would be heard. The head of the Roththaler ducal family, Ed Roththaler, a powerful and imposing figure, would appear. The final boss of Act 4 had arrived. Crippen Roththaler was here, wearing a sly smile. Somewhere, sunlight slowly streamed through the red-tiled roof. Inside, a voice echoed, I'm really glad to see you're doing well. At the dining table, Thonia sat in a daze. Staring down at her plate, the voice spoke again. It's been a while, but I still haven't had the chance to properly apologize to you. I heard you went through a tough time because of a foolish and thoughtless member of our family. Outside, a piece of paper bore the name Ed Roththaler. He had been expelled from the family. The voice continued, As you wish, we've already cast him out. Still, I wanted to apologize to you once more. Phonia, still holding the knife she had been using to cut her food, replied coldly. It's fine. You don't need to worry too much about it, Crippen. Sitting across from her was Crippen Rothstaler, smiling as he shared the meal with her. Phonia looked at him and thought, Crippen Rothstaler, he shares the same blood as Ed Rothstaler. There were many attendants around him, but their practiced smiles couldn't hide who he really was. Phonia thought to herself, he used to be a dignified, noble, kind-hearted, and a wise head of the ducal family. You could tell just by how respectfully the servants acted around him while attending to his needs. But then she insisted to herself, I know his true face. She saw through his outward appearance and understood the real Crippen Rothstaler. This man was clearly a monster. At that moment, he looked at someone and said, You are. Besides Crippen Rothstaler, Lortell was also at the dining table. Responding to his question, the representative from Elter Trading Company stood up, carefully bowed, and said politely, Sir, I'm Lortell Ketchel. It's an honor to meet you. Crippen Rothstaler replied, So you're the beloved daughter of Elter Ketchel, the Golden King. I've heard much about his sharp insight and courageous spirit. Lortell gave him a charming look and said, We go wherever the profits are. After all, the call of money is what guides us. Crippen Rothstaler looked at the other person with contempt in his eyes and said coldly, I know. An announcement was made to assemble the negotiation team. During lunch, they checked the condition of the stage's sealed grimoire and confirmed the payment method. Secret codes were written on slips of paper. Each participant wrote down their bid, and the highest offer would win the item. The sage's sealed grimoire was a treasured artifact of Sylvania Academy. Inside the academy, Crippen Rothstaler and Lortell sat facing each other. Phonia was deep in thought about the sage's sealed grimoire, which was considered the academy's most valuable treasure. It was kept inside a glass case, carefully preserved. The academy didn't want the public to know it was selling such a rare item due to financial difficulties. Phonia sat next to the vice principal, unable to stop thinking. That's why Principal Obo Forsyst had come up with a clever plan. I'll oversee everything as a public observer and representative of the principal. Vice Principal Rachel will secretly manage the auction, and the method was simple. Right here, right now. On the other side, Crippen Rothstaler and Lortell sat facing each other, visibly tense. Sitting at the highest position were Phonia and Vice Principal Rachel, the one who had offered the highest price to obtain the sage-sealed grimoire. Phonia's face was serious as she pondered. Earlier, she had read about the method of exchange and how to search for similar items in trade books, those containing distinct cosmic energy, command books filled with alchemist spells. There were legends about ancient currency, Flynn 8100 coins, symbolic books like the only one that analyzed the replication of biological magic were stored in the Royal Library for 6730 coins. Then there was the magical travelogue written by a wizard exploring the mysterious southern continent, priced at 7020 coins. On this side, Lortell was sneaking glances at her, but Phonia didn't pay any attention. She kept calculating intrinsic magical value, academic value. These are research subjects, but value itself is a luxury. Lortell clearly knew. Her face twisted with malice when she saw Crippen Rothstaler put pen to paper and sign. Phonia thought the price and the transaction invoice are much higher. Crippen Rothstaler gently picked up the pen and signed without hesitation. Still, he kept a smile on his face as he signed the document. Phonia believed the one who would take it home would be Crippen Rothstaler. Two attendants brought the agreements from Crippen Rothstaler and Lortell to the vice principal. The vice principal said, I've received the auction payment. Thank you both for your valuable input. Phonia glanced at the vice principal and thought to herself, this was just a basic auction with no price cap. The key to this kind of setup is knowing your opponent's highest bid. She recalled what Lortell had said earlier. We'll go wherever we can make the most profit. Phonia took that as Lortell revealing her true goal, to make money. Phonia weighed the situation. If profit was her goal, then Lortell wouldn't make a higher offer. The highest reasonable price for the book was 8,100 coins. Anything more would be hard to resell and would likely lead to a loss. Phonia thought to herself, if Crippen had just bid a little more than Lortell's highest possible offer of 8,000 coins, the sage's sealed grimoire would have been his. The vice principal held the paper and began to read. I will now announce the bidding amounts. Bidder Crippen Rothstaler offered 8,500 Flen gold coins. Looking at the result, Phonia thought just as expected and turned to look at Crippen Rothstaler again. Crippen Rothstaler wasn't the type to come to the academy just to make a small profit from a book translation. The real question was, why was he willing to pay such a high price? The vice principal continued, bidder Lortell offered 9,400 coins. Phonia was stunned, unable to believe her eyes. She thought to herself, so it wasn't about profit for her. The vice principal announced loudly, the sage's sealed grimoire will be traded to the Elter Trading Company. Lortell bowed slightly with a smile. Phonia was still shocked, so it really wasn't about profit for her. Krupin Roththaler said angrily, "Let's go." The vice principal moved on to contract arrangements. A representative from the Elk Trading Company invited Lortell to a private room. Lortell replied, "All right." As Krupin Roththaler's group left, Phonia turned to Lortell. "So, what was her real goal?" she asked, surprised as if something had just clicked. Could it be? She thought, recalling Lortell's earlier words, "Princess Phonia, we're allies in this matter." She considered it carefully. From the very beginning, was Lortell's true objective just? Lortell pulled her hood up and walked away. Phonia kept thinking, was she trying to stop the book from falling into the hands of someone dangerous like Krupin? She watched Lortell's back as her thoughts deepened. No, she's not the type to act out of a sense of justice. Even so, as someone as corrupt as Krupin and his questionable motives were only her own suspicions, she hadn't found any real proof, not even with her authority as a princess. Lortell headed toward the door. The image of Ed Roththaler flashed through Phonia's mind. There had to be someone giving orders, someone behind all of this, someone who understood Krupin Roththaler's dark nature and wanted to stop him. She recalled Lortell's past words and actions. "I just want to confirm with you, it was only a small deduction. My superior, Ed, is keeping a close eye on the Roththaler family. Even after being kicked out of the house and thrown aside, he kept going with unwavering persistence, working himself to the point of illness. And even then, he kept fighting against the darkness surrounding the Roththaler family until the very end." Phonia suddenly realized that the person behind everything was Ed Roththaler. The weight of her thoughts drained her strength. She clutched her head, trembling, and collapsed to the ground. Claire rushed over in panic, crying out, "Princess!" In a faint voice, Phonia said, What have I done?" In panic, she covered her face with her hands and thought, how could I push someone like that into such despair? The princess was overwhelmed with guilt, but maybe this misunderstanding would lead to something good in the end. Outside the grand castle, the rooftop shimmered in the sunlight. A voice sighed softly, A message appeared, certificate of contract transaction. Buyer, Lortell Ketchum, Elter Trading Company. Seller, Obo Forces, Sylvania Academy. Transaction amount, 9,000 Flen gold coins. All signatures and seals have been completed. Payment due within 7 days from the signing date. At the same time, in the same room, a quiet sigh echoed. Lortell stood in front of the mirror, unsure which accessory to choose. She thought to herself, if I sell it back to Duke Krupin, I'll get at least 8,500 coins, right? Since I bought it for 9,400, that's a difference of 900 coins. Saying she wouldn't sell a book back to Krupin was just a merchant's bluff. Lortell's expression changed. She picked up the piece of paper and glanced over it. With this certificate confirming the sale of the save-sealed grimoire, I can ask her to help me with anything. How could he bring that up in front of a merchant? Lauren said, "You've made a mistake that's really unlike you, Ed. A favor from Ed for just 900 coins? That's a steal." She had the paper and lay down on the bed, saying happily, anything at all. Looking up at the ceiling, her face lit with excitement, Lortell said, if the princess saw this look on her face, she'd probably cough up blood. So at the end, Lortell wins. Near the wooden house, Jix was talking to Ed Roththaler. "You should have seen Lortell's face when I handed over that letter. Maybe Elka really is just that innocent." Ed Roththaler nervously held his bowl and said, "I think she might be attracted to me." He paused to think, and Krupin Roththaler is also taking advantage of the inside information he has. A sense of unease crept in as he thought about what might happen next. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Ed, you're awake?" A strong gust of wind blew through from a distance. It was Janica. She was out of breath. Jix looked surprised and said, "Janica, it's not even noon yet. Did you run all the way from the department office?" Janica replied, "I finished my morning shift. I'm free now and will do my assignments tonight." Ed Roththaler said, "Oh, I'm sorry for making you worry. Janica, I heard from Jix." He added, "I heard I caused you a lot of trouble." Janica quickly shook her head. No. Jix added, "But you were running all over the academy crying, and that started rumors about you being heartbroken and stuff. Last time, you even barged into the academy's conference room." Janica quickly covered Jix's mouth and shouted, "You-wah, you-wah." Suddenly, a bear spirit came over and dragged Jix away. Janica cheerfully said, "That was funny, Jix. But you know, it's really cold today. Be careful not to catch a cold." Jix got pulled away, only managing to yell up. Ed stood silently, at a loss for words. Then from behind Janica's hair, Mug appeared with teary eyes and said, "Just end me. Master Ed, please just end me." He jumped down, walked toward Ed, and said loudly, "Ed, I've been such a fool. I had no idea you were pushing yourself so hard." Ed Roththaler looked surprised and said, "What? You were here?" Mug burst into tears. "I wanted to jump out and apologize right away, But I was afraid my presence would affect your mana, so I borrowed mana from Miss Janica instead. Ed, speechless, said, "Why are you being so dramatic?" On this side, Jix and the bear had been wrestling for a while. Jix said, "Considering you've been unconscious for 10 days, he's not overreacting. Yeah, I can understand why he acted that way if I was out for 10 days. Ed suddenly realized something and said, "Wait a second, 10 days. He thought about the deer from the other day. If he'd been unconscious for 10 days, the meat must have gone bad by now. Then he remembered the fishing net in the lake. It was probably torn since he hadn't been checking it." Ed Rostaler let out a deep sigh and said, "I've lost all my food supplies, which means I'll have to start over from scratch." Janica spoke up, "You're planning to overwork yourself again, aren't you?" Ed slowly opened his eyes. On this side, Janica stood with her arms crossed and said, "It's okay. I'll help you." Jix chimed in too. "I still have a bit of free time before my next exam. I can help you gather wood." Then Jix added, "When it comes to work, just take it as it comes. Everything will work out in the end." He looked toward the makeshift tent and said, "It suddenly hit me. Not long ago, that tent was just made of straight branches. I was living in a wooden shelter in the forest barely held together. I had absolutely nothing, not even a single coin. I slept alone in the dark, getting bitten by insects with no one to rely on. A lot of dull, depressing things happened, but it's okay. I got through all of it, and I'm still alive today." Then he looked at Janik and Jix. His eyes softened. "He's right," he said. "Everything will be okay." His gaunt face caught Janika's attention. "He looks really tired," Marilda said. Janica leaned against Marilda and asked, "Do you think so, Marilda?" Marilda replied, "But this is your chance. That red fox is busy negotiating, so she won't be around as often right now. You should take advantage of this moment." Janica nodded in agreement. "Yes, yes." Marilda explained, "That girl is actually pretty clever. You need to learn from her. Whether you like it or not, if you want to win a man's heart, you'll have to become a fox too. First, we need to change the way you dress. Right now, you look like a frumpy housewife from the countryside." Janica said shyly, I look a little messy." A moment later, Marilda's voice rang out, "Perfect." Janica was surprised. Marilda stood up, looked at Janica, tied her hair up high, and said, "Not like your usual self, full of life and energy. Guys often like that contrast in you when you're doing your everyday tasks with a bit of a sly edge. Show them that side of you. It'll be great." Janica lit up. "Really?" Marilda replied, "When you do that, she rolled up her sleeves a little higher and tied her hair up. You give off the vibe of someone who's working hard for him, like a devoted homemaker. That's a good look." Looking at her, Marilda continued, "You're seeing him today, right? Go build something with him." That was Marilda, a high-level spirit beast and a dating expert who had never actually dated. Janica blushed and repeated, "Build something." Marilda reminded her, "Don't overthink that part. Just say it, Janica." Marilda suddenly raised her voice, startling her. "When you go help him today, what exactly are you planning to do? How are you thinking of getting closer to him?" Janica stammered, "I wasn't planning to do anything." Marilda's expression changed, and she fell silent. Suddenly, Marilda shouted, shaking the whole forest, "A woo, woo." A bird flying overhead grew irritated. "What's going on down there?" Marilda let out a sorrowful howl. "Exactly." Then she spoke loudly, almost mockingly. "At this point, do you really think someone as tough as him would fall into the same situation again? Look at how far he's come. He's growing at an unbelievable pace. Do you really think an opportunity like this will come around a second time?" Janica panicked and quickly covered her ears. Marilda was like a wild beast, her whole body radiating fierce energy. There's no strategy more powerful than being by his side during these tough times. She had to use her position to support him during this phase. Yes, even if there were personal motives involved, even if she had to be a little clever about it. Janica quickly responded, "You're right, but I have a plan. Just hear me out." Marilda, curious, stepped closer. "Huh?" Deep in the forest, Marilda agreed, "I understand. That's pretty good." Over at Ed's cabin, it was already quite late. A fire had been lit. The stew Janica made was delicious, on a whole different level compared to Jix. A pot of soup boiled over the open flames, filling the air with a mouth-watering aroma. Ed Rothaler thought maybe I should learn how to cook from her, but more importantly, I need to focus on recovering. He cracked the door open, letting light spill into the room. After all the help he received, he couldn't afford to stay exhausted forever. Wrapping himself tightly in a blanket, he lay there thinking, "I can't really say I'm doing great. The headache and slight fever are coming back." Suddenly, a noise made him open his eyes. Ha! Ha! A pair of legs in short socks and leather shoes appeared behind the door. Then came a voice. "Are you tired, Ede?" Janica was peeing in, her upper body visible just past the doorframe. Ed looked surprised. "You haven't gone home yet?" Janika's cheeks were slightly flushed, and she looked a little shy as she gazed at him, still wearing her pink apron. Her pink hair was tied up with a red ribbon, making her look absolutely adorable. He asked again, "So, what are you up to?" Janika leaned against the doorframe, squinting her eyes and smiling cheerfully. Then she walked in and sat down comfortably on the floor, leaning against the side of Ed's bed. He pushed himself up with both hands, lifting his upper body to look at her. Janika closed her eyes, placed her hands on the floor beside her, and bent one knee slightly. With a relaxed tone, she said, "I don't plan to do anything." Ed asked, a little unsure, "Nothing at all?" He still looked drained, dark circles under his eyes, and he was sweating in front of Janika. He said, "You don't have to pretend everything's okay." While Ed looked down, Janika stayed leaning against his bed. She looked at ease, but her body slowly shifted closer to the head of the bed, inching toward him. Eyes still closed, she said calmly, "Everyone goes through this. You're exhausted, both physically and mentally. I know you work harder and train more than anyone else." Janika remembered the time she collapsed in the arena square after a battle. She had curled up, hugging her knees. Khan stood nearby, watching her. As she recalled the moment, she shared it with Ade. "A lot of people supported me and tried to cheer me up when I was struggling, but in the end, what helped the most wasn't their words. It was the person who just quietly stayed by my side." Janika turned around. She was sitting with the light behind her, her wide eyes fixed on Ed, who was half sitting on the bed. She said, "You've been through a lot, haven't you? You did great, Ed." Ed looked at her and replied, "You don't have to do that," which made Janika respond, "Hey." Janika's face showed frustration. She rested her chin on her hands, which were placed on Ed's bed. She spoke directly, "Come on, you're not okay. You need to rest. You know that, right? Just admit it. You're struggling, Ade." Ed didn't say anything. He simply closed his eyes and let himself fall back onto the bed. One hand rested on his stomach over the blanket. Then he finally spoke the truth to Janika, who was still sitting there watching him. "Yeah, it's been a tough time." His slightly long hair hid his eyes. He let out a breath. Ed paused as if lost in thought, then finally relaxed, lay still with his eyes closed, and said, "Really tough." Janika closed her eyes and smiled as she heard him say it again. "It really has." The warm yellow light from the lamp in his house shone on the two of them, creating a cozy scene. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, filling the wooden cabin. Ed sat up and let out a breath in the morning light. Phew. The blanket was still covering his legs. His eyes shifted slightly as if he noticed something. It was Janika, fast asleep, still sitting by Ed's bed. She had her head resting on her arm, tilted a bit to the side, but still facing him. She must have slept really well. There was even a little drool at the corner of her mouth. At first, Ed let out a small chuckle, then burst into loud laughter. Ha ha! By now, he no longer looked tired, and the dark circles under his eyes were gone. He seemed to shine in the sunlight coming through the window. In that moment, he confirmed to himself that he was fully recovered. A detailed survival skill chart appeared. Rank, Intermediate Craftsman. Specialty, Skilled Carpenter, level 14. Design, level 10. Resource Management, level 13. Carpentry, level 13. Stone Carving, level 6. Hunting, level 10. Fishing, level 7. Cooking, level 6. Repair, level 5. Advanced Crafting Skill Zone. Soul Formula Solution. Magic Engineer. In the Advanced Magic Engineering Crafting Skill Zone, Ade had doubled his skill proficiency, tripled his understanding of magical engineering items, and tripled his collection of crafting recipes. On the Extreme Type Spirit Wind Wave Generator board, the system showed level 1 automation sensing, level 1 analysis, and again level 1 analysis. The rest of the analyses were still unclear. Ed had just finished washing his face. Standing under the sunlight, he wiped his head with a towel and let out a quiet breath, thinking to himself, "I haven't progressed as planned over the past 10 days, especially." His thoughts drifted to the Advanced Magic Engineering Crafting Zone and his research on magical engine items. Advanced crafting skills have a major impact on core statistics and offer far more variation than general skills. Ed recalled the times he had studied magical items. The issue is that there's a clear limit to how far someone can go through self-study and reassembling magical engineering items alone. A golden magical item was taken apart piece by piece, revealing a glowing core inside. He reflected that most magical engineering items were rewards from main storyline quests. So for those who didn't want to get involved in those situations, it was hard to obtain these items directly. Ed remembered the moment he saw Taylor practicing swordsmanship with Ayla nearby, but Taylor didn't seem very interested in magical crafting. Ed thought about the scroll with the crafting formula, probably because having a formula doesn't mean you can create a magical item right away. The necessary materials are missing, materials that only appear in later stages of the main storyline. But my situation is different. His eyes drifted off, lost in thought. Then someone's voice broke through his train of thought. What are you thinking about? Ed was sitting on a large rock, still holding a towel in his hand. He glanced toward the source of the voice, then continued thinking. Because here I have someone who can find any material, no matter if it's in this world or the next. Lortell, her bright red hair glowing in the sunlight, was sitting on a fallen log. She said, I feel better now that you're looking okay. I was really worried. Feet in black socks and leather shoes stood firmly on the ground. Lortell said, I'm glad you're still doing well. Do I look okay? I may seem fine, but I've got chronic fatigue. Lortell closed her eyes wearily, leaned forward a little, one hand on her hip, the other brushing off her thigh. She complained to Ed, my hair's dry, my skin's rough. Getting back to normal's not going to be easy. She walked over and sat down, almost right next to him. Ed asked, even with everything going on, you still came all the way of the northern forest? Lortell replied, yeah, I needed a break too. And there's something I want to tell you. She spoke seriously. It's kind of strange to keep calling it Elter Trading Company when the Elter family's already fallen apart, don't you think? So I'm going to rename it to just the trading company and restructure the business. I need someone to help manage the staff, oversee the assets, handle product sales, and take care of other outside affairs. Ed's face and hair were still wet. His eyes glanced at Lortell, waiting for her to go on. Basically, a co-director, Lortell told Ed. His eyes shifted toward her, but he stayed silent. Lortell's face slowly turned red. She smiled, looked slightly away, and said, just imagine it. Lortell described her daydream, where only a wall separated them. He was in one room, standing and reading documents. Lortell was sitting at her desk, working. She explained in detail, you wake up in the morning and head to work at the headquarters of the trading company. We're just one wall apart. You'd be making huge profits. As the co-director of Elter Trading Company, I'd even give you a share of my personal assets. It'd be almost like we were married. As soon as she said that, Lortell covered her face with both hands, her cheeks flushed. She closed her eyes and turned away quickly, blurting out, oh my gosh, what am I even saying? Haha. Ed leaned slightly toward her, calling her name. With a puzzled look, he watched Lortell, still covering her face. He asked suspiciously, isn't it a bit strange to go that far just for me? Lortell stayed silent and turned to look at him. She lowered her head and pulled up the hood of her cloak. Her face sank into the shadow, making it hard to read her expression. She said, you don't even know anything, which made Ed blurt out, what do you mean? Lortell still kept her face hidden under the hat, though she seemed to be looking at him. She lowered her head and said, I know what you're thinking. You're probably wondering, what's wrong with this girl? Or maybe you're thinking, I can't make such an important decision based on the emotions of some young childish girl. Lortell pointed out directly, you want to keep your distance from me in the end. Ed broke a slight sweat in front of her, but she was right. He admitted to himself that it was exactly what he wanted, but he couldn't say it out loud. He just said, well, not necessarily. Lortell stood alone on a mountain full of gold coins, a place where countless greedy people had struggled, now lost and desperate. She interrupted him, but that's because you don't know. After living a life in a world where gold coins come and go, and where you'd be betrayed if you don't betray others first, what do you think would become the most important thing? Someone who never betrays? Lortell slightly tilted her eyes and spoke to Ed. At that moment, she still wore the hat, but she had lifted her face towards the sunlight, giving her an aura of brilliance and confidence. Lortell placed her hand on top of Ed's, which was resting on his knee. She opened up her heart. She would always be by his side. Even if one day all the wealth disappeared, even if the whole world turned its back on him, she would still stay. Ed stayed silent and looked up at her, water still dripping from his hair. He thought, for some, that's family. For others, it's a lover. And for a few, it's a soulmate. Then he looked down at Lortell's hand resting on his. But for Lortell, who had seen countless rises and falls in business and wealth, she simply said, nothing more, nothing less. This time, she lifted her flushed face from under the hood of her cloak and looked straight at Ed. She gently said, can you stay with me? Ed, a bit flustered, called out Lortell. He closed his eyes, lowered his head, and with a hint of frustration said, say it without trying to hold back your laughter. Lortell laughed, leaning back with her hands resting on a rock. She laughed freely, then said to him, you didn't fall for it. Huh? That's too bad. I almost had you. Ed replied with a hint of annoyance. The way you suddenly changed your tone made it obvious, you dummy. Lortell said, I'm human too. You know that. My back keep taking, but so what? Don't you feel even a little bit like protecting me? She turned to look at him with sparkling eyes and a slight blush on her face. Her fingers played with the ends of her hair in front of her shoulder. Acting sweet, she said, usually when I show my shy side, it touches people's hearts and makes them melt. The river was calm, with large and small rocks scattered around. Lortell went on, ugh, how boring. Still, she looked genuinely down. She leaned both hands on the rock, head lowered, like she was trying to hide in the shadows, legs stretched out. She admitted it wasn't entirely a lie. Ed looked at her posture and listened to her words, still holding the towel in his hand as he watched her. His face was still wet, but he looked at her calmly and directly. Ed answered, I plan to graduate from Sylvania. I'm not leaving until then. Lortell didn't say a word. Her face was hidden in the shadows, where no one could see her eyes. When Ed mentioned that if I didn't have any plans after graduation then, Lortell stayed in that same position and gave a faint smile. Then suddenly, Lortell stood up, walked forward, and turned her back to Ed, making it impossible for him to see her face clearly. She said, yeah, I can wait until you graduate, but you know you don't really have a choice, right? She held a letter between two fingers and added, I'll be using this ticket soon. She turned her head, smiled at Ed, waved the letter in her hand, and cheerfully said, it's really nice to see you again after so long. Ed closed his eyes and let out a sigh. It feels like I just did something wrong. Just thinking about what's coming and feeling like I owe her something. As he sat there on the rock, staring at the ground in silence, Lortell had already walked a distance away. She held the letter to her chest and quietly let out a relieved breath. That was way too close. Lortell thought to herself, what if I said, you belong to me now, with total confidence? She turned around, facing the sunlight, and held the letter out toward Ed. That's what I planned to say to him at the end. But when she saw Ed, his expression was distant and troubled, as if his mind was full of heavy thoughts. His hair and face still held traces of water. She silently thought, seeing him like that completely threw off my plan. If she had come out just a little later, her true feelings would have shown. Lortell hid behind a large tree, pulled out a brown pouch, and took everything with her, except for one gold coin. She stared blankly at the pouch, even noticing the small change from paying for magical equipment. It would be so awkward to see him now, she thought. She took the pouch and walked down the path lined with trees whose leaves had turned golden. She headed toward a wooden house with smoke rising from its chimney and a small wooden shed beside it. She made up her mind, maybe I can just leave it in the shed. Suddenly, the wooden door swung open. Janica was still wearing her apron as she stepped out the door, hugging a pillow. Her slightly messy hair was loose and fluttered in the breeze. Her face still showed signs of sleepiness. When she yawned, tears welled up in her eyes. With her eyes still half closed, she said, Iwa, already at the river. I should get some food ready for when he comes back. Lortell and Janica were both startled when they saw each other. Lortell's face darkened, still holding her coin pouch. Her eyes widened and her mouth dropped open when she saw Janica walking out of the wooden cabin. Lortell angrily asked, Why are you coming out of there, Janica? At the same time, Janica clutched the pillow to her chest and asked, Why are you coming from the river? That was the beginning of a new disaster for Aid. Lortell and Janica glared at each other with clenched teeth, sparks flying between them. A voice echoed in the clear blue sky. If you only eat meat and vegetables today, you'll be seriously lacking in nutrients. Young Master Ed, you need to make up for it with dinner and drink plenty of water. Ed was chopping logs with an axe when he heard Mug rambling. He acted like he didn't care and replied, Yeah, I got it. Flying in front of him, Mug went on, If you collapse again, I won't survive. For my sake, please stay healthy. I want our contract to last a long, long time. Aid. When he saw a poor little bat with tears in its eyes perched on the axe handle, Ed stopped working and said to Mug, Looks like Tarkin yelled at you. There are unreasonable people everywhere. No matter where you go, I'm sorry about that, Mug. Ed stood up straight, one hand in his pocket and the other holding 3 letters, and let out a sigh. He thought to himself, anyway, thanks to Jix and Janica, I've got enough wood and food. Looking at the 3 different letters in his hand, he added, and thanks to Lortell, I can now equip this place even better. The only thing on my mind right now is these 3 letters I received before collapsing from exhaustion. One letter from Lortell reminded him to stay cautious, warning that no one knows what the Elter family might do. Another was a personal letter from Princess Phonia, sealed with Crepin's crest. The next was slightly yellowed with a blue seal. Ed remembered that clearly. And the last one came from the Academy, though the sender was unknown. A man dressed formally, almost hidden in shadow, with ear-length hair and glasses on his face. This man was none other than Professor Glast. He sent me a letter, saying he wanted to meet with me privately after the meeting. Ed remembered how he felt back then, like his whole body was sinking underwater. He recalled, unfortunately, I couldn't meet him because I lost consciousness. I don't know if he trained me since I had already passed out from exhaustion. In Ed's mind, he pictured Glast casting a spell, with a magic circle glowing behind him. The wind picked up, blowing his large cloak and his hair. Professor Glast was the final boss of Phase 2, and the last scene of Phase 2 had already begun. Ed remembered most of that scene clearly. A man in a white cloak, holding a large staff, stood facing the Grand Academy. As Ed remembered it, Professor Glass always believed that a small number of gifted people could change the world. To revive Sylvania, the greatest and most talented saint in history, he studied magical physique, a power that could break the laws of the world. To complete the magical physique, he needed the sage's sealed grimoire. But the Sylvania Academy had been deceived by Lortell and sold it. Vice Principal Rachel stood there with two maids beside her, raising the bid between the two buyers. Behind her was the sage's sealed grimoire. In a moment of desperation, he stole Sage's sealed grimoire and tried to transfer Sylvania's soul into Ayla's body. Ayla, who possessed a magical physique said to mark the beginning of a new era of advancement. At that moment, Glass was surrounded by dark mist, with lightning sparking from the staff in his hand. He stood atop a magic circle, with Ayla lying unconscious at his feet. Glass' gaunt face looked down, and a violet light flickered across his glasses. Ed remarked that's exactly the kind of plot a madman would come up with. But then Taylor arrived to save Ayla. He broke through the trap and the hidden laboratory. Beneath the underground reservoir where the soul library was hidden, Taylor swung his sword in fiery red arcs, destroying everything at incredible speed. After his entire plan was ruined, Professor Glass made a sudden declaration, just before falling from the towering magic spire. The towering spire blazed with light at its peak, glowing with his magical aura, shades of pink and violet interwoven like lightning bolts. As he leaned back and began falling from the top of the tower, Ed remembered, even though he only dreamed of the Academy's rise and discovering new talent, his final words were, while Glass was falling, his glasses flashed, hiding his eyes. His hair lifted in the air, and he seemed to be mouthing something. Ed tried to recall. What were his last words again? The book Sage's sealed grimoire glowed red under any circumstance, marking the final battle of Phase 2. It was the beginning of Glass Invasion War, the moment when the Sage's sealed grimoire changed hands. That was the turning point. It all started when Professor Glass kidnapped Taylor's friend Ayla. While Ayla clutched herself in fear, her legs slightly pulled up behind the iron bars, a voice echoed, "Awake now, Ayla-tris." Terrified, she said, "Don't come near me." In front of the bars stood a massive demon, its body seemingly ablaze. It was enormous, with a long scar across its chest. On its back were what looked like either wings or deformed limbs. It grinned, baring its teeth, and the voice spoke again. Understandable. The demon of the underground lake is pretty frightening, isn't it? Ayla trembled and said, "It's your fault," staring at the silhouette of a man who stood at barely half the demon's height right in front of her. Ayla held both arms in front of her, her blue eyes slightly teary. She cried out, "Why? Why? I hate you, Heek." The man turned his head. Ayla shouted, "Ed Rostaylor." Ed looked at her calmly. "Aren't you being a little selfish?" Ayla still looked terrified, stepping backward. Her arms stayed in front of her chest, legs slightly bent. Ed stood there, unmoving, his head turned away from her. Its eyes were hidden behind his long hair, making it hard to read his expression. Then Ed said, "What I mean is, we were both kidnapped." He thought to himself, "I was taken too." He seemed calm, but sweat ran down his face as he let out a sigh. Act 2, final scene. The Glass Invasion War begins. Ed turned his head again, his face emotionless. "What I mean is, we were both kidnapped." He confirmed silently, "I was taken too." His long hair covered his eyes as sweat dripped down. He sighed and thought to himself, this wasn't part of the original plan. Act 2, final scene. The Glass Conquest War, the final, begins now. 3 days ago, in a fully equipped wooden cabin with windows and a chimney, under a clear blue sky, his hand split the golden magical artifact into two semicircular halves, revealing its complex inner components. Ed thought, even though I managed to do everything that seemed impossible 10 days ago, unfortunately, I couldn't train at all during that time. He stood there, holding one half of the magical artifact, studying it closely. He reflected Professor Glass' expedition must have already begun by now. But sadly, he still couldn't improve his magic skill level. To train in magical techniques, he needed blueprints and materials. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and widened. He realized, wait a second, I remember now. The golden magical components shimmered. He recalled a way to significantly boost his magic skill. And remembered that the final phase of the Glass expedition involved 4 locations. First, a spiral stone staircase. Second, an underground sewer. Third, a mysterious room. And fourth, a magical tower. To him, the most challenging among them was the third trial, the secret laboratory. In the laboratory room, bookshelves lined the walls with objects floating in midair. A gluey blue light blanketed the entire final boss chamber of this level. Rhina, the librarian of the Soul Library, was incredibly powerful. She appeared like a spirit, fierce and glowing with a brilliant blue light. Her long hair flowed wildly, and she wore a floor-length dress. Her 10 fingers were razor-sharp and terrifying to look at. As Ed recalled, she's so strong that without using the sacred sword, there's no way to defeat her. Behind Reyna, books and even bookshelves floated in the air, Ed reflected, but that's Taylor's problem to deal with. What really interests me is the knowledge inside the soul library. All kinds of scrolls in different colors hovered in the air. Ed thought to himself, this place holds countless valuable magic tech formulas. I remember there were at least 20 of them, including 2 legendary level magic tech crafting formulas. His eyes filled with contemplation. He glanced sideways. It's a risky move, but as long as I don't go there alone, things should be fine, right? He fell into thought, pressing his lips together and tilting his head slightly toward Janica, who was standing behind him in a pink apron, pouring 2 cups of tea. She was happily chatting with a little green spirit bird.